Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our nice little cartoon in the lobby. I'm Thibaut Munier, co-founder and CEO of Numbly, which is a data marketing technologist, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this new webinar of our MarTech series. We called this one Cookieless from theory to practice. So if you're a member of the digital community, which I assume you are, if you spend your Wednesday afternoon watching us, you are probably already overwhelmed by the global growing frenziness of articles, webinars, and everything on cookieless, which some even like to call cookie apocalypse. So as always, there's a lot of buzz, exaggeration, and a lot of too conceptual things, which I don't understand, and very little actions. So we know one thing, that it's now the time probably to take some action. And that's why we decided to have some of the best experts on the topic today. So around the table, we certainly don't pretend to have solutions, but at least an action plan to test maybe a lot of things in an identifier agnostic way. Test the different options out there and discuss them with a great panel, a balanced panel. This is the best we can do, right? To handle this incredible level of uncertainty. So in order to address that topic, which is maybe the hottest one in the MarTech space this year, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome 4 amazing speakers on this virtual stage today. So Travis, I will start with you. Good morning. You are one of the very few global experts on this topic. You are also the SVP Addressability at LiveRamp, one obviously of the key players in the ad tech space on this question. And you're also one of Numbly's partners for the past 7 years, I think. So who else could we invite for this? You are live from San Fran, very early for you, Travis. We appreciate so much your presence here with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm really glad to join everyone this morning or this afternoon.
Yes, and next is Paul-Antoine Strulu. Hello, Paul-Antoine, you're General Manager Southern Europe at Xandr. AppNexus actually became Xandr after being acquired by AT&T. It's a company that is very dear to, I think, everyone's heart in the ad tech space. It was founded by Brian O'Kelly, a great friend and a veteran, obviously, in the industry. One of the key proponents also of the open web, obviously. You've always differentiated yourself at Xandr, I think, with by being more tech savvy, more open, more transparent, and you allowed for so much innovation in the programmatic space. We've been working with you guys for over 10 years, I think. And because you're both on the buy and sell side, it's always amazing to test new things, new features with you. So thanks so much for being with us, Paul-Antoine. It's a great honor, and your views and actions are just priceless, I think, for the future of this industry. Janaka. Hello, Janaka. Welcome. You're Director EMEA, Data Strategy and Analytics at Johnson & Johnson. I noticed, Janaka, I must say that with Paul-Antoine, you are our second electrical engineer today on this panel. So I don't know if this is too much. We'll see at the end. But in any case, you know tech, and especially you know it from the inside. You worked at Yahoo a while ago now. You've been on the media side. You define yourself as a GDPR veteran. You're based in London, and you're now leading data strategy and analytics in Europe at J&J, which is a reference in the CPG space. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Janaka, today. Welcome. And last, Jules Viron. You are representing Crédit Agricole Consumer Finance today, one of the leading European banks in the consumer banking space. You represent a 10+ year partnership with us, Numbly. You've always had a great analytical touch. You have the talent, for sure, to explain very simply some very complex things. You love measurement, you love analytics, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us. You will be presenting with our team a very interesting test on ATS. So welcome you all. And I will have the pleasure in this conversation today to co-moderate this panel with my dear friend Luca Cozonis and Astrid Demiol-Flavard, both teammates at Numberly. So welcome both of you, and thanks for being with us. To kick off this session, we thought the key thing to start with was really to look at this global consensus on privacy issues. I think it's so important to always keep in mind the fact that users, regulators, and ecosystems all move towards one same single direction. And there are a number of facts for that, which I'm not going to go into details. But there is a global consensus, and it's very important to keep this in mind. And there is also a strong need for action, absolutely, because we see a lot of companies hesitating in face of that huge uncertainty. And so, if anything, I think the idea today is to find some concrete, pragmatic steps that companies could move forward with. And so, to continue, the first question I'd like to look at, Luca, is the types of impacts, the global types of impacts that we see resulting from the end of third-party cookies. Can you describe this a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Thibaut. So yeah, in this context, as a brand, you need to keep your focus more than ever today with this challenging time, let's say it. So to know where to start, nothing is more important than have a clear mind as an organization with a right diagnosis. So with the panel today, we have the chance to host. We'll go through different angles of these impacts. And before giving them the mic, in order to help you as an audience to go from theory to practice, because it will be our obsession today, we propose 4 layers of analysis. One, the overall impact, so what impact will have the context on your global organization. 2, the data stack, how Cookieless will transform your data strategy and assets. 3, on targeting and activation, how will you do in a cookieless world? And 4, measurement, which is more important than ever in this new context. So maybe we can give the mic to Janaka for the first angle, let's say, and hear you about your analysis on the impact for global brand. Very interesting in your point of view.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here today. So I think overall, data strategy itself has itself at the core remained pretty stable. Third-party, second-party, and first-party data is still what we're trying to get more precise with. Less reliance on third-party data. Second-party data, we want to establish relationships so that we can create scale, and then really focusing on the first-party data and build those stores up. But in this new world that we're coming into, which is probably about, I would say, a year away, based on how things are progressing with Google and the changes themselves. So there's going to be more reliance on, I believe, first the final bucket of that first-party data, and I think like. E-com was accelerated this year by COVID. I think this is going to accelerate the plans for first party and zero party data acquisition for brands. I think that's an important focus. In terms of second party data, those partnerships have become increasingly more complicated, and if you're on the brand side, you know that driving these relationships through the layers of privacy can be incredibly complex and incredibly time-consuming, to the point that you're trying to figure out if it was actually worth the actual effort, if the juice was worth the squeeze, as one of my colleagues says. And then how does third-party data work in the new sort of cohort-based ecosystems or ecosystem that Google is proposing, and how do things like frequency management and measurement in general, how do these things function? So these are all definitely questions. So again, while the overall buckets of our data strategy, I think, are not different, the way that these things are going to be implemented are going to be significantly impacted, and we need to lean into that, I think. And so the systems or the solutions themselves are becoming increasingly fragmented, especially in the European markets. So the dream of centralized 360 consumer view is becoming more and more complex, and I think decentralized viewpoints on and sort of almost point solutions on those viewpoints it seems like the makeup of how brands are going to really sort of flourish in and be more precise, continue the journey towards precision marketing in this world. And I think also markets, if you deal with multiple markets, you know that these markets are very different in the way that they approach this world of uncertainty. I think some countries or some organizations or even some brands or sub-brands will take an approach which is, let's figure out stuff after things lock down. So, the test and learn approach is they're not ready for that yet. And some markets, organizations, or sub-brands, they'll go straight into, well, we need to, the other side of this swinging pendulum is we'll test absolutely everything and pilot and learn as much as possible. And so fundamentally, I think in terms of solutions, it's looking at how best to approach this world of uncertainty. And I think from my perspective, I fall into test as much as possible, learn as much as possible, and you'll end up in a better competitive position in the future versus wait and see, because in that scenario, you're not prepared. And let's say even if you chose a particular solution and tested it out and failed with it, there's learnings there versus not doing it.
Thank you so much, Janaka. I'm sure we'll get back to some of what you said because there are questions, I think, already. But I really like to turn to you, Travis, now, and maybe you could give us a sense of why you think that we should start, and especially brands should start preparing now.
Absolutely, and thank you, Thibaut. If we jump to the next slide, I think really the message is that the cookie has already gone today on 40% of the inventory. So on Firefox, on Safari, on Microsoft Edge, the cookie doesn't work. So we already live in a cookieless world. We saw iOS 14.5 roll out just a couple of days ago on Monday. And so the opportunity for brands is to immediately start getting the benefits of cookieless targeting. But it's also the fact that Chrome's cookie change is coming so quickly in the spring, and it's coming right after Q4. So we've heard that the change will be happening in January or February of next year. That means that marketers have to execute their Q4 campaigns, then immediately pivot. We're saying let's do the opposite. Let's move the change ahead of time. Let's use this summer for marketers to make the transition. By Q4, using a combination of cookieable and cookieless strategies, so you get the best of both worlds, and then you're ready to move into Q1 of next year on that new cookieless world. So I think to summarize, the world is already cookieless. 40% Safari, Firefox, Edge. IDFA changes are happening now, so you already need to start buying on people-based omnichannel IDs. They perform better today, and then we really don't have 8 months before the cookie goes away. We have a much shorter time when you factor in that you need to be planning for this well ahead of Q4 and then locking down your Q4 campaigns.
Thank you, Travis. So, Paul-Antoine, we'd love, I think, to better understand how publishers and advertisers can actually adapt to this changing environment since you're on both sides.
Thank you, Thibaut. And yes, precisely. What's very interesting working for Xandr is that we have customers across the industry and doing very different jobs. So if you move on to the next slide, This is by no means a perfect, explanation of the fragmentation that Yanaka mentioned, but we don't think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution for this dilemma. So I've tried my best at breaking it down and starting at the top with maybe the most ready solution that I'm sure Travis will get into on the industry identity solutions that are on many aspects perfect. They offer targeting, measurement, frequency, and the only thing we can challenge is the scale. But it's I tend to agree that those solutions are available now. You could start testing them, and they work really well, and they would be pretty efficient. Then you have publisher solutions. Our publisher customers are not going back to what they were doing with direct sales. They're going to continue to do programmatic, and I'm a firm believer that they are going to be able to continue providing value to their customers, also via programmatic channels, even without cookies. Then you have contextual solutions. I think that there's been the buzz, and many startups. We tend to watch startups, many startups in the space over the last 12 months. Very interesting to see ad tech reinventing itself. It's part of this industry, and I think it's to be followed. Then modeled solution, it's maybe something that people are less familiar with, but it comes from discussion we're having internally. Thibaut, you are referring at engineering background. Why do we need a cookie to do frequency capping? Like, I think it's just because the cookie was there, so it was pretty easy to implement. But there could be other ways to do frequency capping as long as you do the math. And I think there's going to be a breed of solution as well that involve simple mathematics to just come up to results. And then the last one are the border-based solutions, which as Sander will also look into. I think there are, even if there is an ultimatum, they are not ready yet for testing, especially in particular in Europe. So that's also a dilemma in itself. Just to conclude, as what we do as Gander, we're going to try to contribute to each of these, and it's a very ambitious roadmap we have in 2021 because we are in service of a variety of customers, providing different added value in the chain. So that's what we're going to try to do. I don't think there is a silver bullet for the open internet, so we need to do that.
Thanks, Paul-Antoine, very insightful, and Yanaka and Travis. I think maybe to sum this up, we have a variety of impacts. For the audience, it can seem scary, but for sure there is a necessity to move forward to avoid a freezing effect. So to guide you again, we summed up here some of the detailed impacts on the key 4 dimensions. On the overall standpoint, Yanaka explained the importance of the international aspect and the different regulations. So you need to have a clear diagnosis, start there to do the right arbitrage, to have the right teams. On the data stack, where do you put your money across first, second, zero party, third party, if still relevant? Which data is really valuable for your organization? On the targeting and activation, we heard Paul-Antoine explain the possible impact of cookieless on different solutions. But so what is the impact on your business and cost efficiency? Maybe we'll see that with Jules after, on your marketing activation, and what actions are in place on your side to reinvent what you do. And finally, on measurement and attribution, how do you plan doing your arbitrage tomorrow without holistic attribution? So maybe we'll go more into details now on possible answers and hopefully give you ideas of how to move forward.
Thank you, Luca. And to start looking at more precisely the different angles here, we wanted to comment on Joanna O'Connell's article you might have read, and I strongly recommend reading. Recently, she is with Forrester, and she wrote something which she called, I think, "Don't let Google's announcement distract you from your data deprecation plans." Very interesting case, in fact, because she really highlights different layers of what she says should be a data stratification, with the first party data with authentication and consent, which we will be discussing now, but also a second layer that each company has and will have in the future, which is anonymous data grouped within cohorts. And this is obviously the notion of Flux and Google Sandbox, and also contextual data being at the bottom of this data stratification strategy. So really everyone has to build, she says, their strategy based on their own addressability mix. And probably an interesting thing to start with is to look at existing actions, existing programs for each company, to see which one could be adapted and leveraging which layer of data. So to really start with addressability, we thought we should definitely look at LiveRamp's infrastructure. It's an important one. You are LiveRamp and Travis, one of the first mover on that front, and I think we'd like all to get more understanding of how that infrastructure actually works. Can you quickly take us through that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Thibaut. So our infrastructure, ATS, the Authenticated Traffic Solution, is a new infrastructure that we've been working on for the past 4 years to really upgrade the advertising ecosystem and move beyond a third-party cookie, but also move beyond device identifiers and IP addresses. And if you get to the core of ATS and what it represents, is a trusted value exchange. So the internet is really predicated on the idea that consumers come and they consume the free content that publishers produce, or perhaps consume premium content publishers produce. And in exchange, they share their data and their identity with that publisher. And so the third-party cookie facilitated this value exchange, this sharing of data, enabled the publishers to make money on advertising, give consumers free content. But what happened is, as an ecosystem and an industry, we did a really bad job of explaining the value exchange. We didn't make it clear to consumers what they were getting, how the data was being used, how they could opt out. And so now we have to correct these. We saw regulatory changes, we saw browser changes, we now see device manufacturer changes. And so at LiveRamp, we believe we have to get back to this trusted value exchange. So the idea that individuals are sharing their identity with publishers in exchange for content, knowing their identity is being used to personalize ads, but knowing that they're getting in return both a more personalized experience, but also getting free content. Individuals do the same with marketers, whether they're signing up for a marketer newsletter, whether they're making a purchase of a marketer, joining a marketer's rewards program. So the same idea of sharing their identity with those marketers. And then ATS and the infrastructure we built is designed to connect these trusted first-party relationships between marketers and publishers together. So if we jump to the next slide and dive in a little bit into how it actually works. So we have to look at the programmatic ad tech ecosystem today. And so you have your alphabet soup of ad tech, your CDPs, DMPs, DSPs, and SSPs. And a typical programmatic campaign is going to require some of all of that. You have your SSP representing the publisher, such as Xandr. You have your DSP, maybe the Trade Desk, maybe also Xandr. Then you have your DMP, where your marketer data sits. And so we've been working, again, over the past 4 years to rewire this ecosystem. So through a partnership with Xandr, through partnerships with folks like the Trade Desk, MediaMap, to enable these platforms to actually transact on people-based identity and move data on people-based identity. So instead of a audience moving on third-party cookies, moving on people-based IDs, frequency capping on people-based IDs, transacting on people-based IDs. And so if we dive a little bit deeper into the details of how does this actually work, how do we take a trusted consumer value exchange and make it work for across the programmatic ecosystem. So here we've got a website. So consumer, there's pop-ups saying, please sign up for our newsletter. Consumer sees value in this publisher, wants to access the content. They type in their email address. There's a clear act here of consent. And in the EU, there would also be the official TCF consent and running the CMP there. That email address is then matched to LiveRamp's identity. And so we ping back what we call an identity envelope. Really importantly, we are not storing, we're not collecting any of the publisher data. We're not building a publisher co-op. A login on one site only works on that publisher. So if you log in on the New York Times, it's not going to work on the Washington Post. So it's really about connecting that publisher's first party relationship. We ping back what's called an envelope to the publisher. This thing gets passed down into the publisher's exchange partners. So companies like Xandr and other SSPs, who then are able to run our sidecar technology. So it's a real-time technology, converts the envelope into our people-based ID. Every platform has a different people-based ID. So as we were designing the ecosystem, security was at the forefront. It's important that we have privacy and we have transparency, but it's just as important we have security. And so that's why we don't have a universal ID. That's why every platform has a unique ID. So if there's a breach on one platform, it doesn't affect any of the other platforms. Those DSPs are able to then buy and frequency cap on it. Importantly, the SSP can also support a private marketplace deal as well, programmatic guaranteed. So the idea being we put the control back in the publisher, back in the marketer. Ad tech really just becoming the middleware that connects marketer and publisher together. And if we just jump to kind of the last side, what does all of this mean? So we're seeing some, and we're going to talk through later today, some strong results. Marketers are now able to buy on Safari and Firefox. So previously, unaddressable inventory is now made addressable. We're seeing the ability for publishers to gain higher CPMs, to take their consumer authentications and offer a product that's really competitive to the walled gardens. And I think it's important to think of an authentication as more than a login. So it could, of course, be a login. So maybe I'm logging into my newspaper, but it can also be a newsletter, any kind of registration wall, a weather text alert. And importantly, we're providing consumers clear transparency. The consumer for every publisher site is having to enter in their email address. They see the value of the content and very transparently share their identity. So we really do see this as an upgrade to the ecosystem for the consumer, but it also performs much better for the publisher and the marketer.
Thank you so much, Travis. It's so clear when you explain it. Paul-Antoine, what do you think about this solution? Can it be easily adopted, you think, by publishers?
So speaking about the publishers, especially the news publishers, sometimes we believe they are newspaper organizations, they are not technical bodies. But actually, they have a pretty high level of mastery of ad tech. If you think about a standard publisher today, they are using an ad server, they are using a competition of SSPs, sometimes something called header bidding. They have implemented like CMP, consent management platform. So over the last maybe 10 years, they have really developed the know-how to adapt. And I'm totally on board with Travis' demonstration that it's just a piece of JavaScript that they need to add to their pages, or some code they need to include into their apps. So definitely, this is something that publishers worldwide could implement at scale. I think the only underlying questions is how much login or email or they will be able to access. And I think that's the only limiting factor. And that's how unlucky we are on the open internet. I guess when you log into one of the platforms, you always give your email and you always log in. When you're on the open web, that I think this group particularly appreciates, we don't always log in, and we don't have, and those publishers don't have access to an email on something we can then build on. So I think that's the only limitation on the publisher side. And then, as you reminded me, Thibaut, then it's on ad tech companies like us to make sure we are compatible between one another. On I can speak that Xandr is going to try their best to implement the latest sidecar on live-on technology.
We trust you on that, definitely. Now it's good with theory. We wanna see real practice, actually. So we wanna look at specific use cases that we could consider, and especially we're obviously very excited today to present you all with this first ATS test in Europe that was run with Crédit Agricole Consumer Finance. So in order to give us some context about it, Jules, can you tell us a little bit maybe describe what was your data journey over the past few years to prepare for this cookieless world.
So, as one of the leaders in French personal loan company, we still had a strong historical brand, which allows us to have a lot of information on our customers. So for many years now, we decided to use this data to be more efficient. We had been working with Numberly for a long time, and we decided together to create our own data management platform 8 years ago. And to go further and be more efficient during the customer journey, we decided to bring our data customer to create a customer data platform and to really target our customer and to see their needs, what they need.
Thank you, Jules. So I think it has been a great challenging journey on the data side together. Very interesting to see the different steps we have done. In parallel to this journey together, we have worked over the past years, as Thibaut said, with LiveRamp, sharing an obsession on people-based, addressable, measurable, and open marketing. And we worked together on integrating our tech and data offers to provide two brands, as Crédit Agricole, but many others, more impactful and transparent solutions. And so more recently, we worked on a triple partnership, that's what you can see here, all together, focused on data collaboration, which is key now. We talked about zero party before, but this concept of collaboration is essential, and how to move beyond cookieless. And we are happy today to open the box and show you the practical case of cookieless database, as explained by Jules, and cookieless activation. So maybe Astrid, you can present to us this first European test with LiveRamp ATS, and maybe show how we helped Crédit Agricole Consumer Finance build a very pragmatic approach on this issue.
Sure, thank you, Luca. So now in practice, how does the ideal test work? The test began in early March. The aim is to test a cookieless route throughout the programmatic chain with the ATS infrastructure based on IDL instead of the cookie. So to do this, Numberly's traders set up two routes, one with cookies, one with IDL. And to compare them with a clean measure, we split the Crédit Agricole Consumer Finance customer database into two homogeneous populations. So how do both routes work? The first route, in blue, corresponds to the activation via the cookie. For these control populations, audience 1, LiveRamp translates the brand customer IDs into third-party cookies and distribute the audience to the DSP, here Xender, to allow programmatic buying. And for the second route, the activation is via the IDL. It's the one that appears in yellow. So for this test population, audience 2, LiveRamp translates the customer IDs into IDL and distributes the segment to Xender via the SSP index exchange. The setup of both tests and control campaigns is of course exactly the same. Same budgets, same broadcast inventory, only the way we target audiences is different. An analysis is done by Numberly to ensure a 360 reconciliations and a granular analysis. And so to move on the next slide, these tests allow us to assess the strengths and reliability of the IDL, and then to validate that the IDL can be natively integrated into the brand CDP. It's now live for almost 2 months. It's a first in Europe, and the IDL pipeline is fully functional. We can now transform audiences, store them in the CDP, and then send the audience to the SSP to activate people via IDL. So let's share the results. So for the moment, the results are promising. First, performance is similar in both campaigns. CTR and viewability are equivalent, which is very great. It's really good news. Then, concerning the budgets, we have noticed that the CPM can be slightly higher for IDL, as you can see on the graph on the right side, which can be explained by the domains and publishers targeted. Concerning the inventory, the publisher Prisma Media is predominant, with more than 85% of impression for the IDL and 45% for cookies. There are more different publishers for the cookie activations campaign, which also explain the higher CPM for IGL. And finally, about the browsers, the proportion of Safari impression is almost 3 times higher with the IGL than with the cookie. It's a key result as cookies are not addressable on Safari. To sum up, the pipeline works. We can now target people with the IGL. We have reassuring elements, quality inventories, comparable media metrics, and the brands must now test new identifier to go towards a cookieless world smoothly and efficiently. So next steps, determine the business impact.
Thank you so much, Astrid. Very promising indeed. Jules, I want to ask you the first question on this. What's your view on that test at this stage?
Thank you, Thibaut. As you know, the data has always been the key to success of our digital strategy and for a long time now. So for us in a digital world and much more with the COVID, it's really important to take the lead and try some new solutions, to keep learning and not letting the regulations far ahead on such a strategic subject. As we can see, the first result seems to be great, and we are really happy with this. We already see that we can continue to use our data for targeting our customers. It's a good thing. And we can target them with a different technology than cookies. It's working. So it's good for us. The volume seems to be interesting and the costs are controlled. Now we have to go to the end of the process. We already proved that we can find a customer on internet with the IDL, but we still have to make sure that we can count a lead for us with this ID. We will have to test some more complex strategy, like retargeting, for example, and to make sure that we can duplicate our current strategies with the IDL. Finally, and for me, a big subject is still on the table, the attribution deduplication subject. In a world with multiple ID and less data consent, we still have to find the new model of lead attribution that we will use to monitor the performance and create our future digital strategy, the strategy for tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Jules. It's very interesting. Maybe Travis, you could give us your take on this test. I guess you've seen a couple of them already. What's your opinion on all this?
I think this has been a really good test to prove that buying on IDL works and that buying on Cookieless works. And I think we saw what we would expect here. We were able to reach Safari traffic. The CPMs were a little bit higher, but in line. We can expect that. We know that the total amount of addressable inventory is going to go down. And so marketers are going to have to pay a slightly higher CPM. I think, once we start connecting those CPMs and those impressions back to real world events, what we've seen in other tests is a substantial improvement in the return on ad spend. So just to share a couple of stats, this summer we ran a test in the US with Fitbit, so the sports device company, and we saw a 2 times increase in return on ad spend. They saw higher average order values, better ad spend returns there. We recently ran a test with a large hotel company. They saw a 400% increase in the number of bookings that they had. So I think it's their next step in the test is connecting this to the attribution and showing the results there. But I think this is an incredibly promising test, and we were really excited to have this be our first ATS test in Europe, and to continue to roll out ATS and increase the amount of publishers using ATS as well.
Thank you so much. We can get back to that test a little bit later on, but we need to move forward and really look at the other side of the world, which maybe should be at some point connected, obviously, or there should be maybe models to connect the two. And it is the non-addressable world, the consentless maybe world. So Paul-Antoine, how do you get value? How could we all get value from the other side of that world?
Thank you, Thibaut. I think it's very interesting, the experiment we have had in France in April. So often in digital, if you can crack it in France, you can crack it everywhere. And I think Numberly speaks about that. But the way the French regulator implemented or interpreted the European regulation is very specific. And as of April, if someone says no on a web page, you can't read a cookie. So it's a very extreme, interpretation. Like I don't think we've seen similar patterns in the rest of the world. So as an ad tech company, you can either say, "Oh, I'm going to stop doing it. I'm just gonna stop doing advertising," or you can try to continue and to implement and change the way you have been working for 10 years. For us, it meant creating a totally new endpoint that won't have cookies at all, that won't read cookies. And I think it got deployed today, so it's quite timely. But it's interesting that there are two way of looking at this problem. Is either you believe it's over, or you think that this, and I think Travis explained this very well, this value exchange between the consumer, the marketer, and the publisher works. And it doesn't mean that because the consumer said it doesn't want to be targeted, that the value exchange doesn't work for advertising. So that's our first month's look back on continuing to do advertising on a consentless world, and I think that gives us a bit of a preview of what could be the case more generally in the future.
Thank you so much, Paul-Antoine. It is time actually to move to the action plan. And Travis, I know you are very pushy on that. So can you tell us through the different steps you see for the timeline of such an action plan?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest takeaway I would say from the action plan is now is the time to buy. What this test showed is that you can buy cookieless inventory today. These solutions work. I think, Thibault, you mentioned at the beginning the need to move from the theoretical to the practical. This is exactly what we have been saying as well. These solutions work in market today, and so every marketer listening into this webinar should know that they can also get the same results that we saw in this test, and every publisher should know that they can see higher CPMs. So we've laid out an action plan here. If we just jump to the next slide, really looking at how folks can begin. And so, looking at us now in the end of April, we have a couple of days left here and moving into May. Really is the time, as a marketer, making sure that you have set up your benchmarks. What KPIs matter to you? Is click-through rate important? What CPMs are acceptable to you? What ROAS are you looking for here? Starting to buy and integrate with ATS, so moving some of your media campaigns over. So we would recommend, as we look in the first half of the year, getting 75% of digital media being moved on IDL and ATS by the end of July. So kind of really leaning into this, going from test campaigns to many test campaigns to eventually campaigns are just running on the cookieless inventory. And the beauty of ATS is that it combines the cookie and the cookieless inventory together. So on one ID, you have access to both. And then as we look towards the second half of the year, we really encourage marketers to finalize the transition by August. So this gets back to, as we were mentioning, we really don't have 9 months to switch away from the third-party cookie. We need to do this before our holiday campaigns, because by the time of September, most marketers are going to be in the midst of their holiday campaign planning. October, November, you're going to look at code freezes hitting. Folks are really going to be focused on making sure those holiday campaigns are succeeding. And we believe this is an incredible opportunity for marketers. This will be the only year where you will have both cookieless and cookieable inventory available at scale during the holidays. By next year, it will just be the cookieless. Last year, it was just the cookieable. So today, marketers have this incredible opportunity right as the pandemic is hopefully ending to really double down on their marketing strategy and hopefully achieve some amazing results by buying on people-based identity for the holidays.
Thank you so much, Travis. Paul-Antoine, we said it in the beginning, you always have a very strong tech mindset at Xandr, and we were wondering if you saw any kind of potential for algorithm-based solutions on your end.
So yeah, I mean, if we put the slide on the page, like if we if we move forward and try to imagine what it could look like in the future, if I go back to the kind of categories I laid out at the beginning, there, third-party solution are third-party identity solution are very efficient. You have this large volume in contextual solution. You have privacy sandbox. You have first-party data either on the buy side or the sell side. I think first, as Jules mentioned, there's going to be interesting things to do in each of these categories. And again, like we're not go back in time, and we're going to use all the programmatic tools on even the most advanced ones in each of these buckets. And that's where, like, I come back to the point that I really don't want the industry to go backwards, and to use the buying platforms and to push them to the limits. And that's the relationship we have had with Numberly for many years now, and to push the platform to their limits. So I hope that some of the things we developed initially for hyper-targeting or retargeting would actually transfer nicely into some of the initiatives, some of them having privacy constraints, some of them not having privacy constraints. And then stealing from your head of trading, Thibaut, at Numberly, him and I had a quick chat on, what about some hybridation between the different categories, right? Can a human being do that? No. We don't think that, even if he or she could do this, the time it would take to set up all those campaigns, all those A/B testing, like all those things, wouldn't be worth it. What about having a machine doing? And that's where the efficiency that we've seen with programmatic could also play out. And some of the most advanced techniques you have deployed could fit nicely into setting up a single campaign that produce a single set of results that can be digested, and where you don't spend too much time. So that's a sneak peek into the future, probably.
Thanks, Paul-Antoine. Before summing up, just after, for your information, the audience will have a session of question and answers. So don't hesitate if you have any question to answer them on the chat just below the live window. We'll receive them in live, and we'll make the best to give you answers, but we will have some time to go over them. So we want to give you the money for the time you took. So please ask your questions. So as we said all together, I think it's time for action as a brand, because you have a window of opportunity this year, and we see that I mean, it's not only this webinar. We have daily conversations with all of you about what is the impact tomorrow, and the impact is different and specific to your organization, specific to your configuration, your tools, your priorities. But what we see in common with all our clients is that you need to be organized, because it has massive impact. And Jules and I think Paul-Antoine just talked about hybridation, and it's hybridation between human and machine, but also between the different teams, the different solutions you have to put in place. So you have to test and organize. And so again, and we can send you this action plan after. It's not just words, it's real advices. You need to start build your action plan based on all these advices. Work on your organization as overall. Start with the diagnosis. Build your action plan. You probably need pragmatic and grounded audits, not stratospheric consulting, but real grounded audit. Understand where you need to upskill or recruit, because you will need to train or challenge your organization. Review your priorities and budgets. Challenge your partners and tools. Then a second, on the data stack, it's your key asset in this transformation. Jules said it. Make sure your organization builds its own patrimony when possible and relevant, that your data is activable, not only something dormant, valuable, that you build the right partnerships to augment your playing field while protecting your sovereignty. I think you understood that in the last months and years with the GAFA. Don't waste time. Start testing now alternative ways to cookies, to do targeting and activation, from new identifiers to cohorts, contextual, and challenge your partners. understand what they do, open the box. And finally, reinvent yourself on measurement, because nothing will be worse than being blind in the mist. So good luck. We are here for you, and maybe we can answer some questions that you.
Thank you, Luca. We do have a significant number of questions. Janaka, it started very early on when there was a question, I think, while you spoke on zero-party data, and so someone asked how you define them and how maybe to collect more of those.
Sure. Yeah. So there's some good definitions out there. I think it's not been nailed down so much, but I'll try and paraphrase. But it's essentially fully consented, opted-in data. So your CRM, for instance, would be zero-party data versus, like the first-party data you get through cookies on your website, for instance, which would be first-party data. It came, I think, mostly from the marketing area. Now it's made its way into the ad tech nomenclature.
It's something we saw also in very interesting. It's a change of, let's say, context where you don't need to collect everything, but sometimes access it. So about data collaboration and partnership. So very interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Another question about retargeting. Do you believe that strategies like retargeting will stay relevant in a cookieless world? In which way could we adapt it, or what could be substituted with? Maybe Travis, you want to take that one. I'm sure you've had it already.
Yeah, so I think retargeting continues to exist in a cookieless world, but I think it's much different. So I think we're going to move to a much more selective way of retargeting. So, looking at a CRM audience, retargeting those based on interactions they've had. But today retargeting happens. You visit a store, an online store. You look at something. The lamp follows you around for the next 2 weeks until you hopefully buy the lamp. I think that type of retargeting is probably going to go away, and I think that's probably good for the industry. So I think that's that has frustrated consumers and has caused them to ask questions of how the data is being used. I think instead it's much more selective retargeting, and I think this is something really important for brands to consider too. Is just because you have the data, how should you use the data in a way that inspires consumer trust? So I think that's something every marketing campaign should have a question of: does this gain the trust of the consumer? And if not, what could we tweak to make it? So, again, I think retargeting continues to exist, but I think it looks very different a year from now than it does today.
Thank you, Travis. We talked quite a lot, and I think it's Janaka who mentioned precision marketing, but someone asks in the audience, media is about big volumes of reach and impressions. This approach can't fill the gap since it relies on a small part of the web devices. So we have some debate here, and I think that's interesting and important. Who wants to talk about this question of reach? Maybe Paul-Antoine, you've had it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's why I try to lay out the differentiated approach, or the fact that we don't want to have just one solution, and we don't think one solution would solve it all. What's interesting is that the solution with the highest reach or volumes today don't necessarily meet the criteria that marketers are used to, and that's the challenge in that part of the world. So either we create new KPIs and new criteria, and I think some of them can be very, very valuable. If you think about brand safety, viewability, that remains even without any identifier. Or people are clever and create, better strategies. We talk about algorithm. Like, I've been fairly impressed with some of the, machine learning capabilities in the last few years in programmatic. Have been deployed mainly on contextual, and not so much on cookies. I totally agree with Travis. Like, the industry has moved on from just hyper targeting, and people now are driving efficiency, return on ad spend. I mean, this is where the machine learning is being applied today. So either we see a change of behavior in the KPI, or we ask programmatic strategies to be more clever, if that makes sense.
Janaka, any take on this?
Yeah, I guess it's a pretty open-ended question. I mean, the way that precision, I think, works in the different systems will be different. I mean, if you're talking about precision marketing in the cohort-based Google world, I think this is a big question mark, right? I mean, so we have definitely had some visibility into how it's going to work, but like if you're, for instance, trying to retarget or retarget people who have visited your website, so that's a typical use case for being more precise with your marketing. That's going to look so very, very different, and obviously there's all the bunch of stuff around, like having to be on if you're on Google Analytics 4, which is not prime time yet. So yeah, I think that there are lots of barriers and there are lots of question marks around how all of this stuff's going to play out, and the scale question with respect to precision is going to be a big one. But there's probably a transition period, so it's a migration plan of sorts. Like, how do you utilize the current world in order to get to the future world? I think that that may help in the scale discussion and the precision discussion.
Absolutely. We have one question on DMPs as well, data management platforms. Will they die in the cookieless world? Jules, is your DMP going to die in this cookieless world?
I hope it won't, because it's a big part of our digital strategy for a long time now. So I don't think so. I think with all the different ID and the way we will collect some information, because we still need to have some information, and I hope we will continue to collect some information about our customers, the one who wants it. So I don't think the DMP will die. I think they will evolve like the different ID.
It's interesting because our panel is our audience is very international, and I think what is called DMP in Europe is not always the same as was DMP in the US. So I don't know where the question comes from, but for sure there has been a lot of articles on DMPs, the ones that are very third-party cookie oriented and very third-party data oriented, which maybe have questions to raise, and some who are more CDPs oriented, more on marketing automation and personalization, etc. But I think, as you said, it's very interesting question of evolution and what is really inside the box, maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to my mind, what we see is an incredible understanding by brands that they want to own data. I think, Janaka, you made it very clear in the beginning with first-party data. There is this willingness to collect data and to not only collect, but actually make sense of that data, connect it to some other places, have an internalized learning curve, test, learn, fail probably, but own it, own data strategy. And I think to a certain extent, we see that this announcement by Google has, and it's almost a paradox, has actually increased that understanding and that willingness by brands to move forward and be more, to be actually better at holding and managing data. So obviously CDPs are a critical way to do this, to run experimental designs, to change metrics, to learn how to measure real incrementality, which are questions that have always been there and around. And I think there's an opportunity to turn this into something very positive for the sake of brands. I don't know if you agree with that. Of course, we have challenges, but this is, I think, very important. Do we have time for a last question? There was one which was, do we risk increased pressure? I don't know, Travis, on the people who have recorded IDs. Do you want to take that one?
Sorry, and the question was increased pressure on?
Increased, I guess, media pressure on those people who would have consented and on those addressable IDs.
I do think we see CPMs go up for the addressable IDs. So I think the addressable IDs become equivalent to what you have in the walled gardens today. So they give the open internet a competitive advantage. They are targetable with first, second, third-party data, but they're also 100% measurable. And now you're able to measure impressions across browsers. So I do think we see additional CPM increase. But so far in our tests, those CPM increases have been very reasonable. And then when compared to the ROAS results, have actually caused higher ROAS. So I think probably higher CPMs, but better performing inventory and better results for the marketer.
Wonderful. I would like to thank you all so much. Or Paul-Antoine, maybe you have one last comment to make on all this. I know you always want to push the boundaries, and maybe you have some ideas. We had one question on probabilistic, models. Maybe
I would say that's where there is an international collaboration or international competition. As at Nexus Alexander, usually we build the building blocks on its company like Numberly, who do the finished product. And I think topics like this and challenges like this are interesting. And sometimes, it's in different parts of the world that we solve different parts of the problems. So I hope this one would be the next challenge we solve.
Wonderful. Thank you all, the four of you. It was just great to have you with us. I know it's not over. I hope we brought some interesting views and ideas to move forward, build your own action plan and test things. I also wanted to conclude with our upcoming webinar, which will be an amazing live session, again, with Hubert Joly, former Best Buy CEO, who just joined Harvard Business School, who will present his book, which will, I think, come out next week in the US, The Heart of Business. So it's on June 3rd, and please join us. We will send you the invite. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Janaka, Travis, Paul-Antoine, and Jules.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.